My name is Belle. I'm a 31-year-old working mom, living with my husband Davy, who's the same age and works a regular job, and our 5-year-old daughter Lenny, who's recently become quite the chatterbox. We're just your average family, neither rich nor poor, and we get along great. But a storm was about to hit our peaceful home. That storm was my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away, and mother-in-law lived alone. When Davy and I got married, we had agreed not to live with her. It just seemed easier that way. Davy was her only child, born when she was older. We'd been married for 5 years, and mother-in-law was getting on in age. Living alone at her age could be tough and even dangerous. Davy would visit her when he could, but it seemed like she was struggling. Seeing my husband trying so hard on his own, I made a decision. We would live with mother-in-law. If my beloved husband was doing his best, how could I, his wife, not support him? I mustered up the courage and suggested living together to Davy. He looked surprised and asked, "Are you sure?" Honestly, I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I felt something needed to change. I couldn't do much with housework, childcare, and my part-time job. If anything happened to mother-in-law, Davy would be the one to handle it. After discussing these important matters, we started living together. Thank you, Belle. Truly, thank you. On a spring day with cherry blossoms falling, mother-in-law arrived at our home, tears in her eyes. I thought living with such a humble mother-in-law would be smooth sailing, but I was wrong. At first, she was reserved, but as days went by, her true colors showed. She began to torment me. I realized I had misjudged her. "Belle, this dish is too salty for me. Can you make it lighter?" When I did, she'd say, "Why is it so bland? Are you mocking the elderly? How rude!" And that was just the beginning. "Please hand wash all my clothes. They'll get ruined in the machine. They're all expensive, you know." When I suggested dry cleaning, she'd retort, "That's wasteful. You lived comfortably thanks to my son, so stop wasting money and start saving." If only she'd pay for her own clothes. Clearly, she was just trying to annoy me. And that was just the beginner's level. Intermediate level torment went like this. "Belle, are you wearing makeup? It won't help. You're too plain. I'm so glad our granddaughter looks like my son. He takes after me, so she looks like me. Her future is bright." Yet mother-in-law would spend over 2 hours on her makeup every morning. She looked like a completely different person without it. I respect her desire to look beautiful, but isn't her foundation a bit too pale? And her cheeks are oddly red. And her bright red lipstick leaves marks on every cup. I'd never say this out loud because it's rude to comment on someone's appearance. But what I can't forgive is her throwing away my precious makeup set. When I came home from my part-time job, it was all gone. Mother-in-law nonchalantly said she'd thrown it away. When I asked why, she said, "I've told you before, makeup won't help you. It's a waste of money. Save, save. From now on, live without makeup. Aren't I the most thoughtful family member? You should be grateful." Grateful? As if. If this were a mountain, I'd surely scream at the top of my lungs. Let the echo carry my frustrations, making sure mother-in-law heard it over and over. But alas, this isn't a mountain. What's worse, mother-in-law only torments me when we're alone. She always waits for moments when my husband is away and our daughter is at kindergarten. I don't want to badmouth her to my husband since she's his mother, but I wish he'd listen. After much thought, I hinted at my frustrations, but it barely made a difference. "I'll talk to Mom." He tried to address it, but mother-in-law would cry, claiming, "I never did such a thing." He even went so far to say, "My wife is trying to trick me." My husband was less confused. I felt helpless. Well, they say seeing is believing. Seeing is believing. I decided to secretly record my interactions with my mother-in-law to show my husband. Now, where to place the camera? As I pondered, the advanced level of mother-in-law's torment began. We started living with mother-in-law in the spring. After a hot summer and a fading autumn, one winter day came. My husband was away on a business trip, and our daughter was staying at my parents' house. It was snowing outside. I usually bike to my part-time job, but due to the snow, I walked and returned in the evening. After coming home, I'd usually clean, do laundry, and then cook dinner. But let me remind you, it's winter, nighttime, and it's snowing heavily. It's not the best time for hand-washing laundry. Yet, mother-in-law cheerfully handed me her laundry, saying, "Here's today's laundry. They're delicate, so make sure, absolutely sure, you hand-wash them." She emphasized because she knew it would annoy me. "I'll wash them with warm water then." "No, you can't. The colors will fade, and it'll damage them. Absolutely, absolutely wash them with cold water." So outside? It's snowing. Don't be silly. I lost it and yelled, "This is ridiculous. Why should I hand wash with cold water on such a cold day? If they're that precious, wash them yourself. How dare you? I'm an elderly woman. Expecting me to wash with cold water? Are you out of your mind?" "Are you out of your mind, mother-in-law?" "I'm always in my right mind." If that's true, it's even worse. She probably didn't expect me to fight back. Mother-in-law glared at me, her face red with anger. But I wasn't backing down. "Why don't you go outside, mother-in-law? You've been indoors all day, so you might not realize how cold and snowy it is. How dare you suggest sending an elderly woman out in this cold? What kind of daughter-in-law are you? What kind of mother-in-law asks for a cold hand-washing on a day like this?" If she had something to say, I'd respond. I was ready to confront her fully. I felt bad for my husband. But if we're going to live together, I can't always play the good daughter-in-law. As I glared back at mother-in-law, she suddenly grabbed my hand. Ah! Before I could think about it, my mother-in-law pulled my hand. She was surprisingly strong for her age. Before I knew it, she had pushed me out of the front door. The next thing I knew, the door was locked. "Mother-in-law! You're not the kind of daughter-in-law I want. Get out! This is my house. You should be the one leaving." But my shouts fell on deaf ears with mother-in-law. She seemed intent on locking me out. No matter how much I banged on the door, there was no response. I was in a bind. I wasn't wearing a coat, and I didn't have my house keys. Luckily, I had my cell phone in my pocket. I tried calling the house. I could hear the ringtone from the other side of the door, but mother-in-law didn't answer. With no other choice, I called my husband, who was due back from his business trip that day, but he didn't pick up. I sent him a message. "Mother-in-law locked me out. It's snowing heavily and I'm freezing. I'm heading to the nearby grocery store for shelter. Please get in touch ASAP." I began my trek to the grocery store. I considered seeking help at a police box, but it was far from here. Given the heavy snow, it would take even longer. The grocery store seemed like the safest bet. I hugged myself, trying to stay warm. My breath was visible in the cold. The snow showed no signs of stopping. The snow is accumulating more and more. Cars, bikes, and even bicycles were nowhere to be seen. It was late, and the streets were almost deserted. I trudged on. But when I finally reached the grocery store, I was met with a sign. Closed due to heavy snow. The one place I had hoped to find refuge was closed. What a day! My only option now was the police box. I wondered how long it would take to walk there in the snow. Feeling increasingly desperate, I continued on. I could no longer feel my fingers or toes. Checking the time on my phone, an hour had passed since I was locked out. I tried calling home again, but mother-in-law still didn't answer. As I walked through the transformed cityscape, heading for the police box, I suddenly heard a cry. "Help!" I stopped in my tracks. I was near a bridge over a river. I strained my ears. "Help me!" I heard it clearly this time. I rushed towards the voice and looked down from the bridge. There, in the not-so-deep river, was a lady, fallen and calling for help. I hurried down the riverbank to her. The icy river water stung my feet. The cold was so intense it felt painful, but I managed to reach the lady. "Are you okay?" "I can't move. It's so cold." "Hang in there." Had the arrival of help made her relax? The lady leaned against me and lost consciousness. What do I do? This is bad. I couldn't feel my hands or feet, and they wouldn't move as I wanted. "Someone help!" My desperate cry echoed in vain. I thought it was over. Then I heard a man's voice. "Hey, are you okay?" My husband's face came into view. The moment I saw him rushing towards me with a panicked expression, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was staring at a white ceiling. "Belle, are you awake?" My husband looked down at me with a worried face. I was in a hospital. Apparently, he had pulled both the lady and me out of the river and called an ambulance. That had been yesterday, and I had been asleep ever since. "How was your trip?"
"It went well. I couldn't answer when you called because I was on the bus. I tried calling back when I got to the bus stop, but you didn't pick up. There were no taxis running, so I ran home. I just happened to see you going into the river."
"What luck."
"I thought you had jumped in, but it seems it was the lady."
According to my husband, the lady I tried to help had jumped into the river in despair. But the cold water had snapped her back to reality, and she tried to get out but couldn't move because she was so cold.
If we had found her any later, it might have been too late.
So the lady was okay. Relieved, I felt sleepy.
"You should rest. You must be exhausted."
Comforted by my husband's kind words, I drifted off to sleep. All the while, my anger towards mother-in-law simmered. A few days in the hospital, I was back to my old self. Standing in front of my home after so long, I froze. Mother-in-law hadn't visited me once while I was hospitalized. Of course, there was no apology. She had locked me out on a snowy night, nearly causing my death. Honestly, I couldn't live with her anymore. Feeling down, I opened the front door. I stepped into it and was surprised. To my surprise, mother-in-law was there, deeply apologizing. "What? Mother-in-law? What's going on?" "Belle, I'm so sorry." I was stunned by mother-in-law's unexpected apology. Really? An unexpected apology? This is leaving me speechless. Mother-in-law continued. "I never imagined something like that would happen. I truly regret locking you out. Please forgive me." What? She's sorry? This mother-in-law? The one who's always been so aggressive towards me? The one who locked me out in the snow? Suspicious. Very suspicious. It would be strange if there wasn't a catch. I narrowed my eyes at mother-in-law. "What will you do if I don't forgive you?" Mother-in-law's hand twitched slightly. "I was freezing out there, you know. If my husband hadn't come, who knows what would have happened. Anyone would know what happens if you lock someone out in a snowstorm. If you didn't, does that mean you're not normal?" I said sarcastically. Mother-in-law's face turned bright red. "What did you just say?" "You think you can take advantage when someone's being nice? Don't get too cocky. My son said he'd end our living arrangement if I didn't apologize, so I did it. Now that I've apologized, let's forget about the whole locking out incident. Now, get back to your chores." She took the bait so easily. I smirked, seeing right through mother-in-law's true intentions. Wow. Her remorse was all a lie. People don't change that easily, do they? Especially not someone like mother-in-law. But just as I thought that, she started her antics again. "Make sure you hand wash my clothes with water." Are you still on about that? Still demanding hand washing? "Only cook what I like. If it's not tasty, I'll throw it away." This is hopeless, absolutely hopeless. She's beyond redemption. I sighed heavily and looked back. You're saying all this, huh? My husband, who had been standing a bit away, was out of mother-in-law's sight. But he had been there the whole time. Mother-in-law's beloved son, my husband, was right there. Davy, what about work? Mother-in-law noticed him and turned.
I took the day off to be with Belle. But Mom, you haven't changed at all.
No, I was just joking.
Joking? It's not funny at all. I told you to genuinely apologize to Belle and never do such things again.
But I did apologize.
You're about to revert to your mean self.
That was just a joke.
That's why it's not funny.
I had warned my husband to keep a distance, but mother-in-law's reaction was as expected, or even more dramatic. She desperately tried to justify herself, and I couldn't stop laughing. Belle, what's so funny? You, on the other hand?
Mom, I'm talking now. Listen to me.
I'm sorry. Even mother-in-law couldn't ignore her beloved son's words. His lecture continued, with mother-in-law listening tearfully.
Why would you be mean to Belle when she agreed to live with us out of concern for you?
I might have gone a bit overboard earlier, but I've never harassed her. She's starting something. I commented on the food's taste, but I just wanted her to know my preferences. I asked for my clothes to be dry cleaned, but Belle said it was a waste and would hand wash them. I told her to wear makeup, but she threw away her cosmetics right in front of me. Which mouth is saying that? It seems mother-in-law wants to believe she's not at fault. I can't help it. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Today's laundry, it's expensive, so definitely hand wash it. Mother-in-law's voice played clearly. Ah! She screamed and tried to grab my phone. I dodged her and continued playing. Definitely wash it with water. You're not the kind of daughter-in-law I want. Get out! The sound of her dragging me out and shutting the door, ignoring my pleas. All of my mother-in-law's violent actions that day were recorded. I secretly recorded our conversations on this phone. Whenever I talked to mother-in-law, I always had my phone on record. Thank goodness for my phone, or things could have been really bad.
Mom, any rebuttal?
My husband asked, and my mother-in-law was speechless.
Anything else to say?
Is there anything left to say?
Yes.
What do you mean?
This is the end. You've trampled on my feelings of wanting to care for you. I want you to leave.
What?
I'm cutting ties. You can live on your own. We won't contact you again. Even if you reach out, we'll ignore it and won't meet.
What?
You sold the family home, right? You should have all that money. Plus, with your pension, you should be fine. We won't help.
But wait, Davy. Are you abandoning me? Betraying your only family?
You're the one who betrayed us.
My husband's angry voice left mother-in-law speechless. She sat down, unable to say another word. The only sound was the dripping of melted snow from the roof. Then things moved quickly. While mother-in-law sat there, lifeless, my husband and I packed her belongings. Her hometown was a 2-hour train ride from our place. She had distant relatives there, but she'd been estranged from them for so long that no one would probably care now. She rarely went out when she lived with us, so she likely didn't have any friends. Maybe that's why she had so much time to harass us, but now it didn't matter. Bye, Grandma. My daughter waved at mother-in-law. Seeing her cheerful granddaughter waving without a hint of sadness, mother-in-law finally broke down into tears. The taxi carrying mother-in-law drove off, leaving behind her sobs. I felt nothing. It was her own doing. With that thought, I entered our home, feeling refreshed. Time passed. Rumors said mother-in-law lived alone in an apartment. We still received calls from her, so she must be alive. But we never met or spoke to her, just as we promised. She'll probably live a lonely life. She destroyed the happiness she had, and the price was steep. With mother-in-law gone, peace returned to my heart. While listening to the washing machine, I served tea to an unexpected guest. It was an elderly woman, the very same lady I had saved on that snowy day. She had been living a lonely life, filled with despair. But the cold river water that day made her want to live a bit longer. "My son offered to live with me," she said. "That's wonderful." "His wife is lovely, but I didn't want to be a burden, so I decided to move nearby instead." "That's nice." "I've been lonely since my husband passed away. I thought life had nothing good left, but I was wrong." "I'm glad you realized that." "As long as I'm alive, there's hope. Thank you for saving me that day." I smiled back at Lady's grateful face. A lady who lived her life with determination and found happiness. Mother-in-law who ruined her chance to live with her son and his family. There are so many ways to grow old. Everyone's path is different. But our own attitudes shape whether our later years are happy or sad. Seeing these two elderly women, I had a vague idea of the kind of future I wanted. To ensure a happy future, and to protect the peaceful days I have now, I reminded myself of the path I should take.